Chicago's L, one of the most iconic transit systems in the world. A complex web of elevated tracks, tunnels, and lines that's been evolving for over a century. But what if we could rebuild it from scratch? Not in real life, but inside a brand new simulation called Subway Builder is a brand new transit simulation game that lets you design and operate full subway systems inside real-world cities. It's built by Colin Miller, and what makes it special is how realistic it gets. We're not just playing train lines for fun. The software actually simulates millions of commuters based on real census data. Every person has a home, a workplace, and a daily routine. They decide whether to walk, drive, or take your transit system based on time, cost, and convenience. In this software or game, you can design tunnels, viaducts, and elevated lines, and construction costs change depending on the environment, like soil type, depth, or even nearby buildings. It's kind of like City Skylines, but focused entirely on transit realism. For this video, I'm recreating the Chicago Transit Authority's L system inside of Subway Builder. We'll see how the real system performs using the game's data model. To start, I wanted to lay down all the tracks that are currently in use by the Chicago Transit Authority. For this part, since those tracks are already in existence, I am playing in sandbox mode, so I am not really focusing on cost. We'll start with the blue line. So here I'm going to show you what it looks like in the software to lay out the tracks. I'm not going to show it in real time because that would be a long video and I think you all would hate me by the time I was done with that. So what I did here is I am flipping between the software and Apple Maps on the transit, so I can look at the stations, look at the elevations, and accurately switch out the stations. I try to make it as realistic as possible. Just around $9 billion, so who knows how accurate that is. Alright, so now we're going to assemble the tracks and stations in the elevated part of the loop. This by far was the most complicated part because you have 5 train lines. The pink, the green, the brown, the purple, and the orange all coming into the loop. And the software doesn't do the best at following the command of stations added to a route. Okay, I had to pause for a second because as I was editing this video together, Subway Builders came out with an update which now allows you to create custom stops along your route, which is specifically used in Chicago. So just pretend that that option does not exist at this point in this video. So it tries to do something else, which was getting really frustrating and really annoying. So what I ended up having to do, which I'm a little sad about, is create duplicate stations in the same spot for different lines in the loop. Alright, the red line. Up next is the red line. And I don't know why I started here, but I think that's just where I was in the map. So here we are setting up the quad stations, and then we switch over to parallel as we head down into the loop. Then we're heading down to the south part of Chicago, and I didn't add in the new stations that will be there very shortly, but I just have what's currently open, and then I'm connecting the track here. Up next is the pink line. The pink line was pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. I think it's the second shortest L route in Chicago. Super easy, just connecting all these stations to the loop, and then it's cool. You get to name it, pick the color, and this is what it looks like to create the route for the pink line. so you can see right there what it looks like when it tries to go up. And now for the Chicago Brown Line. I started just above the loop where the Brown Line starts its own track at Merchandise Mart, and then it quickly joins the red and purple line. And then I jumped to the end of the Brown Line and made my way back down towards the loop. And as I got past Southport and headed towards Belmont, the flyover was the most fun part to make because you have a lot of different elevations, and having tracks fly over other tracks was actually pretty cool to do in this simulation. And then so now I'm just adding in the route for the Brown Line. Alright, now we head to the Green Line. So the Green Line is one of the only lines in Chicago currently that splits off into two branches as it heads towards its terminus. The Green Line splits off into two branches just after Garfield, one heading towards the University of Chicago towards the east, and one heading towards the west, which stops at Ashland Avenue. And now we're on to the Orange Line. The Orange Line is one of the more simpler lines. It doesn't have too many stops. It gets people from the loop to Midway Airport relatively quick, just creating the route. That was so quick. So the Purple Line stretches all the way in the north from Evanston, and it connects to Howard, where the Red Line ends in the north. And the Purple Line also runs express from Evanston to the Loop on weekdays. And now the Yellow Line. I am not going to show you the Yellow Line, one, because I forgot to record that, and two, because it is so stupid simple. It is just two additional stops. Alright, so now we're going to add some train cars to these routes. Supposedly the CTA has over 1,500 train cars, so I'm just gonna add a bunch here and buy some. So this is one of the fun parts for me, is adding train cars to timetables. So you can't really be too specific here. They just have high demand, medium, and low. And so when you hover over it, it tells you what times that means. Basically rush hour, a little bit of lull, and then like kind of overnight service. And so this is what I'm adding for the Red Line. Gonna start off with about 25, then 14 cars, and then the Red Line is one of the 3 24-hour train lines in Chicago: red, blue, and most recently orange. So I'm just gonna add 7 back and forth services for the low demand overnight hours. I'm going to fast forward a tiny bit with the rest of the service frequency, but you can see what I'm doing here as I speed it up a tiny bit. And now for the moment of truth. Here we start out right at the beginning of the recreation of the Chicago L system. We'll start off on day 1 with our lines here, and we'll see how many people decide to take the train versus driving or walking. Right now, just because we started, we have 0.34, it's going up, percent of people taking the train. The population is, I think we're just getting adjusted here on day 1, so we're going to fast forward 55 days and see what's happening. Hopefully we can get the Blue Transit higher than the red driving. Here we are at the terminus of the Blue Line. We can see people arriving and departing from O'Hare Airport. And it's pretty cool that we can see the trains pull up and leave from this station. Now I know O'Hare Airport, the Blue Line, has it's 4 tracks right at the end where the trains end. I didn't do that. I know it's not 100% realistic. Maybe I'll change that up in a future video to make it 100% realistic. So here we are at day 55, and you can see that the demand status has increased, and it's only 55 days in. What's cool about this software is it does show you kind of like fake-ish newspaper headlines, so that's kind of fun to read. And we can also see here that we have some trains at or near capacity, and it lets us know what station that's at. And then we also can adjust transit cost and see expenses, which is pretty fun to dig into, but I'm not really going to dig into that into this video. So here we also jumped to day 80, and I'm just going to kind of play around with some of the stats, looking at the details. It tells you when the next train arrives at each station, and you can view each line and every single route on that line and what the capacity is, which is pretty cool. And I'm just going to adjust some of the service frequencies for the overnight hours here on the brown line. I'm going to reduce it from 14 minutes down to 24 minutes and see how that affects the overall transit, which is kind of fun to mess with these things to see what is the most sensible. So here we are. You can kind of see that I am trying to offset or raise the revenue and lower the expenses by adjusting certain routes and hours of operation for certain lines. So that's pretty much all I'm going to show you guys for this video. I could go on and on and on in time. Maybe I'll let this play out further in a future video and see how the ridership changes throughout time. But I'm also curious in exploring future extensions to certain routes in the Chicago CTA, or even adding new lines. So that'll be in the next video, but I really appreciate you all watching, especially if you made it to the end. So thank you guys. Bye.